The independent bike bag market has exploded over the last couple of years, but that hasn't always been the case. In this episode of the Party Pace podcast, we talk with Martina from Swift Industries, a company that I feel has really ushered in this explosion of cottage industry bike bag makers. We talk about the transition from being a maker to a business owner, whether or not you would start a bike bag company today in 2023, and also the elusive goalpost of success. Before we get started, though, let me say something. Everybody deserves a great bike fit. It's simply one of the best upgrades you can do for yourself and for your bike. And that's why I'm so excited about today's sponsor, MyVeloFit. MyVeloFit is an awesome web-based tool that lets you dial in your fit from the comfort of your own home. All you need is a phone or a camera, a bike trainer to hold your bike up. It uses motion capture to analyze your position, and then it makes suggestions on how to improve your fit. The best thing for me is that it's not just for road racers. They have a whole variety of different fit profiles. So depending on your goals or whether you're just starting out or not, they've got a fit for you. If the idea of getting a bike fit is intimidating or it sounds expensive, definitely give my VeloFit a shot. I've reviewed their product and have used it to dial in my own fit as well as fit myself to the many review bikes that come through the channel. Use the link below and the discount code PARTYPACE23 to get 10% off of a membership to my VeloFit. So first off, congratulations on 15 years. That's crazy.
It is wild, Russ. I can't believe that it's 15 years.
Did you think you'd make it this long when you first started?
I don't know. I wasn't thinking about 15 years. I mean, we were too young. We were too young to be thinking about 15 years, like 25 years old when we started Swift. We started out of our basement making bags for our buds and both had Jason and I, my co-founder, we just had our other jobs. And so we just kind of grew it.
So looking at the landscape now, it's probably totally different from when you first started. Like there wasn't the same plethora of bag makers. What was it like when you first started the business?
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning quite a bit. When we started this company, the craft and kind of like subcult scene was really, from what I was exposed to at the time, was totally focused on the messenger bag and the messenger scene. So that's actually how I got my start, was making messenger bags at Reload. And I made so many crossbody bags and backpacks for messengers the first 2 years that I was an industrial sewer. But that's really where we saw independent makers like staking their ground and making product. And so when we stepped in and started wanting to make panniers and bike camping bags, or bags essentially that lived on the bicycle, the landscape was wholly different. We knew of a handful of independent companies. I really, obviously, like Paradise was in the mix, and they were highly influential. But even just like a little bit more cottage industry, Acorn Bags comes to mind. And North Street was starting up also with a little bit more of like an urban vibe at the time. Um, and then Revelate was starting at the same time as us. And those really felt like the most visible to us companies that were just like sewing out of their basements. And that was where we were. And then we had the big kids like Ortlieb, and Arkell and Lone Peak at the time, like really didn't see what I wanted in those products, the products that I could get conventionally. And so this whole crazy, silly business was created because I just didn't like the bags that were on the market. They didn't suit me. And we thought that we could make something like a little bit more fun and also build like a culture and community that really did not exist in the space at all. Like we knew that there was like strong bike community, but like the community around bike camping and touring and adventure, um, just had a wholly different vibe. It was like the models we had were people who were touring from, the North Pole to the South Pole and like taking 2 years off to go do that. And we're fully loaded, like, oh my gosh, so heavy, just that was what the picture was of like the bike tourist. And I think that like together with you and a bunch of other like kind of um I guess whatever influencers over the years,
Were
people
we
who
called
just,
influencers back then?
no, that term didn't exist. I think we like really rethought what that could look like in really, really significant ways. Whether it was an overnight or a week-long trip or just to go bike fishing. I think that like in a lot of ways, what we turned on its head was this idea of an adventure being this like super committed feat where you just drop out for tons of months or 6 weeks. And I still love this idea that like on bike, you can have adventure on your commute. It sounds so cheesy, but it's like, bear with me. It is like, it's really true and really important for us to remember that like, it's really just how you look at your environments and how you stay curious and engaged with what's around you to think about like where something new and fresh and exciting might be like just kind of like in the wings, even if it feels like you're in a familiar space.
I think about, when people travel, let's say that you go to Europe, you take their buses and trains, and all of a sudden it's like this big exotic adventure, but it's someone's
Mhm.
commute, and it's all really, I mean, physically it's the same thing that you'd be doing at home, but it's just like that mental state of mind.
Absolutely. It's totally, I mean, again, I'm just gonna say it again, like just to stay as curious and like open-minded as possible. Like I think that comes like very naturally to me. Like I just see stories everywhere. I see histories everywhere. I want to know about them. I want to experience them by bike. For some reason, that has been like the way that has like really captivated me for who knows what reason.
Mhm.
But it's really special. It's really special.
So your role in the company has changed a lot
Yeah.
from being the designer and the person actually physically sewing the bags to someone that's kind of more orchestrating the whole business. When did it make sense for you to step away from the production and let other people handle that?
When I was like the least reliable person on the production line, when I was the liability, was when it was time to step away. And I guess to elaborate on that, when we started the company, like I really had no ambition to be an entrepreneur. I had no ambition to be a manager or a business leader. I really like my fulfillment came from making like functional, beautiful objects uh, out of like materials and creating something with purpose. Had tremendous satisfaction for many years in simply identifying as a maker. I didn't need anything else. And then slowly but surely, and you build a business and then you have customers and you have payroll and employees and all these incredible different parts of the ecosystem start to build around you. And I was just finding that both I was like compelled to nurture and grow the other elements of the business, but also I had to. Like it really is a very holistic thing to have a company and to grow it in like the most healthy way you can, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, and so there came a point when things like getting the word out about Swift and thinking more about where we were going long term um, both intrigued me and were like puzzles I really wanted to dig into that took me away from the sewing floor. But also, like, we had to because we were like we were seeing enough success and demand from our growing customer community that we then invested in bringing in incredible people to grow with us. So we brought in employees, and then you get to start, you got to start thinking about how to take care of them and their futures in addition to the ecosystem of the company. I was on the sewing team in some capacity until 2016. So we started in 2008. So the first 8 years of our business found me at a sewing machine. And honestly, I have been at the sewing machine again. So we're working on a very special project for Made Bikes. And we've totally revved up our sewing fleet for that particular project again. I don't know if you can hear the buzz, but the crew is sewing right behind me, and I'm back at a sewing machine for the next couple of days.
In talking with you over the years, it seems like you kind of relish and enjoy some of the business development part. When did it dawn on you that, hey, I like being an entrepreneur?
Well, first I detested it. And really it put me in a pretty tough place. Like when I started making that identity shift from maker to entrepreneur to then thinking of myself not only as an entrepreneur but also as like a manager and a leader. I was really sad to let go of this like maker identity, even the designer identity, to move into those other spaces. I really had to kind of compartmentalize. And as a creative, as somebody whose like identity was really bound to being a creative individual, I didn't see at first the amount of creativity that could be assigned to the leadership and entrepreneurship and operational systems design in a business. And I got
Hmm.
really bummed out. Like I really was in a really, really tough place personally. Um, and that came at the same time as man, growing small businesses. This may resonate for some of your listeners who have experience with this, but there are some brutal stages, like devastatingly brutal stages to running a business. And they may look a little different from business to business, but essentially what happens in the scaling story is you're not making enough money, but you've got a lot of demand, but you don't have enough cash to get yourself to the next level. And at the time, I didn't really understand that. Again, this was like in 2016. Um, and so something had to break. Like we had to shift something. And that shift for us meant scaling. And we knew that even just moving some of our manufacturing to partner factories here in Seattle would be a really important part of that story. And so then it became okay, how do I want to lead this business and lead with integrity and think about developing the different roles that started to come out. Before that, we were just sewers. We were all sewers sitting next to each other, just sewing bags. And then all of a sudden, you have managers to manage the sewing team or the factory or the designers. And then came the puzzle and actually tremendous joy in teaching individuals and guiding individuals to becoming incredible managers. And I loved that. I had no idea
Hmm.
how much I was going to love that. And I love that to this day. Y'all should also know that I was a high school teacher before or while I was starting Swift. And I think that just that process of learning somebody's learning style and then working closely with an individual for them to lean into that and then become a really strong manager. I don't know. It just I love it so much.
That sounds like you've managed to find fulfillment in other places beyond just like being finding the fulfillment and making an object, but like helping guide people.
At one point, it really dawned on me why don't I think of building this company as a creative pursuit? There was just, it had never occurred to me. And the moment that I was like, okay, this is my next design puzzle, it's no longer the optimal handlebar bag. It is a healthy company. Then I was like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to like ideate and work through design theory.
So you guys, you've definitely grown since when we first met you, and you were working out of a basement. I mean, do you ever look back fondly and see some of the advantages
Mhm.
of being a smaller company, and what are they?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Whew. Um, I think that like for me, some of the trade-offs have been like um even like agility is a big one, right? Like we could sit down and, maybe already 10 years ago, we could have sat down and brought a product to market like pretty dang quickly. And that was because we were making like 75 of them, to start. And that felt like a really big restock. And, we were in control of all of the steps. And so we could pivot and adapt and move where we needed to move in a very short amounts of time. Um, and I miss that. I totally miss that. And I also understand why at this point that's like just not where we can be with Swift. And frankly,
Mhm.
like, I don't think like I think it would be a little bit harmful to be like, oh, I'd like to take the company back to that kind of a place because it the longer timelines have come with also like incredible advantages. And so it's just about like weighing where Swift is today and where we want to go and how, like what's going to do that. I don't know, with the again the most integrity, I guess.
What are some of the advantages that come with a longer kind of production cycle?
One of the biggest things that may like ruffle some feathers on the internet, I don't know, we'll see, is that by scaling, it has allowed us to go overseas. And like, I am so grateful for our partners who have grown with us domestically. And also, we are astounded, like drop dead astounded by the quality of product that's being made by our partner factory in Indonesia. And also like the technical innovation by way of tools and proximity to mills and, just all of the like really critical resources of like industrial infrastructure that are still overseas and thriving overseas. All of that has made for just like some of the most beautiful Swift bags we've ever seen. We see that our bags are going to last even better, even longer. We're seeing less waste coming from the orders that are coming in by way of like manufacturing flaws. All these like kind of like um, nuanced things about working with factories that are like well supported in their sector. And then so like better products, longer lead times are because we are taking more time to source textiles and parts more sustainably. That's like the research side of things is like way more intentional. And then the R&D, like we really commit to like crazy number of hours per product that goes into testing before we put something out. So all of those things, like they just start taking a bit more time on each leg of the journey.
Was
hmm
it a hard decision to do manufacturing overseas, or was it just kind of like an inevitability with growth?
I don't think it was an inevitability with growth. Like we could have continued to scale. Okay, so maybe I can like unpack that a little bit. If we wanted to not be able to continue to give people raises and health insurance and retirement and all of that stuff, we could have scaled in the US, but the margins would have been so challenging. There are a few factories still remaining in the US who could produce our bags for sure. But it would be a lot more expensive to the consumer and of like a little bit more detriment to like all of our personal health. Like, I mean, just like our income and well-being as workers at Swift too. So it was a hard decision. And it felt like a really important one. Like we're really collaborative here at Swift. We're a small team. Um, and so, I work super closely with our head of operations, that's Kelly, and Jason, who is my co-founder at Swift, and Alana, who runs our brand. And then also just generally with our entire team, just to be like, okay, like, we're coming up against these puzzles in order to, you know, thrive in these areas. What do we need to do? We know we can't keep going in this direction with X, Y, and Z. We'd have to kind of pivot. What's more important? How do we want to navigate it? Just really like looking at pros and cons and working collaboratively to try to make these decisions.
I'm curious, like, as you've grown, how has your definition of success changed?
So I think when we started, the definition of success was like making rad bags, like bags that like looked novel and distinctive and got people adventuring. That was like our measure of success. We were like, okay, cool. Like we want to make rad product. We want to see more people traveling by bike. We want to make a little bit of money on that maybe, but that really wasn't the focal point. Again, we had like other jobs, and we were super young and broke and didn't care. And I think now like success actually carries a lot of the same tenets. Like we still just like really from our own experiences at like as individuals, everybody at Swift still is just like the more people who are out on bikes who can have some semblance of this like incredible experience that we have when we're on bikes, like yes, let's do this. This is so important. This is so important for like us as individuals. It's so important for our sense of community when done, like depending, maybe a company has a role in that, maybe not. But in our case, we think that we can have a role in it. And then also, like now, even more than 15 years ago when we started this company, it is like a sheer necessity when we talk about climate, and how we navigate cities and live in urban environments. So like that is as much as ever really critical. So there's like the bicycle riding component, and then there is this like adventure mindset that I spoke about earlier that we just think is like so it's like such an accessible way to find delight.
Hmm.
And like and how lovely is that, right? Like if a bike really can be a joy machine, then oh great, like let's inspire people to keep getting on their bikes every day. Then there are other things now that like are added to it. Like could those of us who have been at the company for 12 to 15 years, like could we dare to dream that we could like maybe retire on this thing? Like that, I know that sounds, so ridiculous, but you like, man, we built this thing when we were so young. And how wild would it be if Swift was around and relevant and like, adapted and stayed relevant in all the right ways enough for it to be of service in some way until we were like old and trying to figure out how to put bags on walkers.
Right. Yeah. Little Walker panniers.
Yeah, yeah. And success looks like, we talk a lot about trying to stay really mindful of creating opportunity at every stage of the creation of the bag or the life cycle of the bag. We're not definitely not at a place where like our bags are fully recyclable, but we want to make sure that there is like people are thriving and ecosystems are not being as or are being like as negatively impacted by our production methods and our partners and all of that through the whole cycle. Like that's one way that we're measuring success and wanting to advance as a company. It's human success, it's the success of the company, it's the longevity of this thing. And then it's like really big cultural questions around sustainability and climate action.
I'm kind of been really interested in the idea of what success is. From our standpoint, I'm like, oh, if we hit 100,000 subscribers, it'll feel successful. And then you pass that milestone, and then there's a moment of like, was that it? Like, now what?
Hmm.
Have you ever had
Totally.
like I achieved this goal that I thought was way out in the future, and then like had a now what moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it happens continuously, and there's a couple of things that I think are really important for maybe folks to know about me. That is like, I don't see a destination. Like, I don't see like, okay, this is where we're gonna be done. For better or for worse, I don't know why I'm wired this way. This is just kind of who I am. Like, I am somebody who's like really engaged in process. And by my, like, the way I think about it is like, oh my God, I can't wait to get to this place so that I can like see what the next challenge on the horizon is going to be. And so that's something. We definitely like, for whatever it's worth, I see these benchmarks and I'm like, I am just as susceptible as anybody else to being like, when we hit this revenue goal and we're giving, and we're written up here or acknowledged in these ways, that is success. Um, of course, I feel that and I'm driven by those things. And also, I think I'm like, again, as like compelled as then like I know that a multitude of new puzzles will come at that moment. And I'm like, oh, what are those going to be? Yeah.
That is probably like a healthier way to live, is to enjoy the process rather than get too hung up on milestones.
I don't know. I don't know if it is. I mean, also at times it feels like a total treadmill because of it. And
Yeah.
honestly, like sometimes the people on the Swift team are just like, dude, Martina, like, are we ever going to get into steady state? And I'm like, huh? So again, like I'm not saying it's the right way or a better way to be. It's just something about.
We talked about how what the landscape looked like when you first started. If you were to start the business all over again today in 2023 with the number of bag makers there are, would you, or or do you think it's too crowded, or would you employ, or like
Yeah,
what strategy would you employ to kind of stake your flag in there?
very interesting. That's a super interesting question. I'm gonna kind of like skirt it a little bit.
Okay.
Only because like there are higher level things at work at Swift that I think are so critical that haven't been met in like the pool of makers. And that is actually uh, most importantly to me, that I'm not seeing the number of female entrepreneurs coming into the space that I think would like really shake and move our industry forward. And so like as much as this business has been really critical as like a connection to the cycling community, a connection to direct climate action, a connection to leadership, it has also been a really, really eye-opening experience into the world of business and the lack of women who are engaged in business. I rarely to this day know where to turn for like business advisors all the way to bankers and lenders who are female identified. And that is true of the outdoor industry and the bike industry alike. And so, like, our existence in that way feels still to me so, so critical.
Hmm.
Um, so, like, is there a room for more female business entrepreneurs in the cycling scene? Hell yes. It is like really critically important still, right? If we're talking about another bike bag brand that's like just emerging now, just for the sake of simply adding bags to the market, I'm not sure. I'm really
Hmm.
not sure. Sometimes I also don't feel like all that great of a capitalist. Like it is a really strange thing to make product and put it into the world when I also look around and I see so much waste around us. And we talk about that a lot at Swift, the whole crew here. What's our responsibility as product developers too, to the amount of stuff that exists in this world?
So, when you first started, you guys were kind of, at least to me, it seemed as if, like a counterpoint to the larger brands like Ortlieb and Arkel. And to some extent, you've not maybe like been occupy the same space now, but you are a larger company and there are like much smaller companies. Does it feel weird to be in that kind of space where
Yeah,
you're like the more established brand at 15 years?
yeah, it really does. It's a trip. There's like all kinds of funny like identity things that come with that. But oddly enough, like I don't even know how to illustrate that across the screen. I wish that I could do it somehow. But like there was I just got an audio thing. Am I still audible? Yeah, okay, cool. Um that's always how it's been. So like because there was like, Ortlieb right here, and then Swift came in as a cottage industry, and then like the whole market kind of moved with some demand and things grew. Ortlieb got bigger, Swift got bigger, and then like a couple of years later, maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe even a little longer, 10 years, then we started to see like more independent or smaller brands cropping up. And so we've always kind of occupied this very strange space in between all of them. And that's really exciting. It presents like a lot I think like a lot of really cool puzzles and um ways to approach like scaling and growing into that middle ground. And also it can feel very isolating because we don't really know exactly who to look to around us. And then also we're like, oh, that's actually really sick. Like if we are, if we're thoughtful enough and like truly independent enough thinkers and clear on who we are as a company, we get to make this space our own. I mean, any company should do that, of course, but I think that just like the kind of the nature of that little bubble that has just happened to be around us has allowed for that. I really have thought a lot about how we've grown and how much we've just like we have changed and we have really stayed the same in so many ways. And
Hmm.
I feel so lucky for that. Like our customer community has like really let us do that.
What's fun for you now working at Swift
Mm,
that gets you excited?
gosh, what gets me excited? Um,
Is it spreadsheets?
Dang, I love I love spreadsheets. I think they're amazing. Like no joke, I really do. But it's actually like the stories that the numbers tell that are in the spreadsheets. That's really what drives it. But I would say like what excites me right now, honestly, is going out and um, checking in with independent bike shops. It's been super, super fun to be able to do that. And I don't know, I'm just going to put it out there to everybody who's listening. Like, bike shops are having a super, super rough go right now. Um, the, um, the sheer like determination that it takes to run a bike shop in general or retail space is already mind blowing and incredible and so challenging in kind of when you talk about the business space. And the way that the ship has just gotten tossed like so high and so low through COVID makes me like really, really feel for independent bike shops. And I just am like super stoked to be showing up and checking in with folks and seeing how we can support them and help. And also like from one business person, independent, crazy independent business person to a next, like kind of
Mm-hmm.
like chatting things through and figuring out like what's next for all of us, you know?
Right.
So that's way exciting. And then like, I just freaking love the team at Swift. Like, I love how passionate they are about bikes. Like, it's unreal. It's been 15 years, and like a new bike rolls into the space, and it's like everybody's just away from their desk immediately with a cup of coffee, like looking at all of the components and, just like we're so in it, like so obsessive. And then just the amount that everybody from like the thoughtfulness and integrity of work that goes into everything from like the accessibility of a hang tag all the way through the end user experience on like what they might define hopefully as like a really challenging ride or a personal feat or milestone. Like all
Mm-hmm.
of that is just it's just so cool to see how this team like really looks at the entire cycle. And that's embedded in the bags that we send out. So, it's not just a bag. It's like really, really thoughtful, innovative, community oriented people who are making this thing happen.